Rob Whedon, and this session is about project governance. In particular, we're going to look at the role of the project sponsor and the relationship between the project manager and the project sponsor. So, most organisations, when they have a project, appoint a project manager. And we're going to spend a fair bit of time talking about the role of the project manager, but today I'd like to talk about another role, which is that of the project sponsor. As I see it, the project sponsor has three key roles, and the first of these is to be the chief representative of stakeholders. If you think about projects that you're involved in, typically how many stakeholders do you think you would have? And I'd suggest that it's probably going to be at least in double figures. And the question is, well, if you've got, say, a dozen different groups or individuals, what's the likelihood of them all agreeing from the outset about what your project is going to be doing and how it should go about doing it? I think the chances of that happening are zero. Yeah? Let's imagine that it's your job as the project manager to bring those dozen groups or individuals together to agree about what your project is. If that's your job, how much time have you got left to manage the time, the cost, the quality of the project, as well as the project team? And again, I think that figure's pretty close to zero. That's why you need this person. This is the person that you can go to for direction. Now, I'm not saying that you don't talk to stakeholders as the project manager. Nothing could be further from the truth. You need to maintain close relationship with your key stakeholders. However, when push comes to shove and stakeholder A wants to go this way and stakeholder B wants to go that way, you need to be able to go to one person for direction, and that person is the project sponsor. So the first role of the project sponsor is to give the project direction. The second important role for the project sponsor is to do with this little bit here. Now, I don't know about your organisation, but every organisation I've been involved with has a political environment. And it can have an impact on projects, and it's not always positive. The question then becomes, as a project manager, is there a great deal that you can do about the impact of that political environment on your project? And again, I'd suggest that's probably not the case. This means that you need someone who does have the authority and the organisational clout to influence what's happening in that political environment. So in that sense, the project sponsor provides protection to your project. The third role for the project sponsor is to provide approvals. Approval to start the project, approval to move from one phase to the next, indeed approval to close the project. At every point along the way, at every major shift in the life cycle of the project, it's important that you get approval from a project sponsor. A lot of project managers don't like the idea of approvals because it means a lot of paperwork, and people like to avoid paperwork where they can. I'm quite different to that. I'll sometimes approach a project sponsor and say, look, I think we need additional approval points here, here, and here. That's not just about making more work for myself, it's about ensuring that I'm doing the right thing in the right way. What makes sense at the beginning of a project when the business case is made, 6 months later, that might not make so much sense. If that's the case, I want to know it. And the approval process keeps me aware of what's going on in the larger environment. So, three key roles: direction, protection, and approval. That's a model for project governance. And I'm sure that you would recognise something like that operating in your organisation. But the question then becomes, well, does it always work? And in my experience, it doesn't. And again, from my observation, it breaks down for two reasons. The first is what I call the benign neglect model. And that's where the project sponsor comes to you and hands you the project brief and says, look, I'm looking forward to some top results. I've got every confidence in you. I'll see you at the launch in 6 months' time. And then they're gone. That's bad. But if anything, this is worse. This is where the project sponsor gets more and more involved in the detail of the project until eventually they're issuing instructions direct to the project team. Now, as I'm sure you realise, that undermines your authority, it undermines your confidence, and it confuses the team. Am I reporting to her or am I reporting to you? Not a good situation. The way to overcome both these problems is to establish this relationship between you as the project manager and your project sponsor. It's the most important relationship in any project, and it needs to be worked on. In a big project, we have what's called a project charter. And that's a document that spells out, among other things, the relationship between you as the project manager and your project sponsor. Now, not all projects are big enough and complex enough to require a formal document. But at the very least, what I'm suggesting and strongly recommending is that you have a conversation. Not about the project as such, that can come later. I'm talking about a conversation about that relationship. Because it is the most important relationship in any project, and this is the most important conversation in that relationship. So, if we can establish the ground rules and the way of working together, then the project is going to go a lot better. If this relationship isn't working, then the project is always going to struggle. So for that reason, I don't care how big or small the project is, I think it's important to chat to your project sponsor about what you require from them and give them an opportunity to explain what they require from you. So, to summarise, the two roles in a project, the project manager, the project sponsor. The project sponsor performs three key functions: to provide direction, a single point of direction to the project, to protect the project from the influence of the political environment, and to provide approvals. To establish that relationship, it's necessary to have a conversation with your project sponsor. Because the saying in the charity industry is, if you don't ask, you won't get. If you don't explain to your project sponsor how they need to fulfill those roles for you, then they can't really be expected to deliver. Okay, so that's project governance. Thanks very much.